Hello everyone, my name is Alexander Monaco and I'm here today to explain to you all the ins and outs of our Team EA, the Gordon, MACD, RSI, and Bollinger Bands EA. So to summarize what I've said in the previous video regarding this expert advisor, which was the introduction, which can also be seen in this playlist that you're watching this video, this EA is a day trader, meaning it buys and sells orders over the course of a day, and any order that was made that is held by the end of the day will get closed. Currently, this EA implements strategy 1 of the Gordon trading strategy, and has existing code meant to implement strategy 2 of the Gordon day trading technique, but I'll explain later in the video about that part. But before we begin implementing these strategies, we found it best to summarize the processes made by the EA in diagrams that you will see in our Confluence page right here. So this is the class diagram. I'll explain more of this as I go on. I'm just giving you a light summary right now. This is our sequence diagram. If you click it, you get a... 1 second. You'll get a enhanced version. And then the state chart diagram is right here. But for now, I'll leave the diagrams where they are. I'll get back to them as I explain how our EA operates at runtime. So during our time working on this EA, the main goals were to, of course, first draw our resistance and support lines, which would be our previous day's high minus average daily pips, ADR, or it's called ADR, previous day's low plus average daily pips, Fibonacci for the previous daily low to high or high to low, and then verify these resistance support lines on other time frames, or just the one we're currently using, which is 15 minutes. Once we do that, once we have our resistance and support lines created, we move on to adding these 3 indicators, RSI, Bollinger Bands, and MACD, to maximize confidence in a trade. The way confidence is calculated for each indicator can be seen in the summary below. The bands must be in contraction and looking to expand. RSI sells below 33.33 and buys above 66.66, and MACD confirms previous indicators by showing whether or not the MACD indicator bars change sides. And if there is a downtrend and convergence is there, it's a weakening trend, and we are soon to expect an uptrend, and that essentially confirms. But yeah, each of these indicators exist to maximize confidence when we trade. Okay? Moving on to the actual runtime of our expert advisor. You can also try this out yourself to get a feel for it. I'm just going to go to Forex. So now at this point you have downloaded our expert advisor and know how to load it up and run it. When we test this EA, it's done on this table template, which you can download from the Gordon Google Drive that is contained within our team Confluence. I'll just show you guys right here. So this is the drive, and then this is the table template right here. You simply just download it, and once you download it, you come here. You right click the table area here, go to template, load template, and click this one right here, Gordon Bollinger MACD RSI. And once you do that, you will see exactly what we are seeing. Okay, so on to the actual testing. Once you set your strategy once you set up your strategy tester in Forex and select the Gordon Day Trading EA right here, you're going to want to set the period to M15, spread 20, and select use date, and pick whatever option you want for testing. But for this test, we're going to use June 1st to October 31st. Input parameters can be played around with over here. Click on Expert Properties and go to the Inputs tab. These values here, well, this is a test value. This doesn't do anything. But these values here affect what you're going to see in the visualization at runtime with regards to the upper and lower lines and Fibonacci lines here. These are going to affect the input values for the indicators in our Expert Advisor. You will get to see this in the code once I get there. Of course, lots determines how many lots this Expert Advisor will order whenever it is confirmed to buy and sell an order. Alrighty, cool. So once you do that, get that out of the way, you can begin testing. I wanted to cut to this part in the video just because this is a good spot to kind of stop at. We're right at the beginning of testing. I also wanted to add that before you do test, put in visual mode so you can see everything that happens here. But I paused at this point because I figured, it would be cool. It'll be cool to show you guys all this stuff. But one thing I want to add as well, when you do test, for me, there was an issue that happened where it went to the default visualization, and you're going to want to do what I did before and load the template so you can get back to this. It'll just go back to the original default Forex template, which that's not what we wanted. But when you get here and immediately when you start, you'll see these lines right here. The red lines are a result of a function called create H lines. I'll show it right here in the code here. Let me see. Go here, create H lines, right? So on tick right here, the first thing we do is create H lines. Let me go to it now. Create H lines. Right. So this function creates lines which represent yesterday's high minus average daily range and yesterday's low minus average daily range. All that's done in this function is simply get yesterday's high and low, the average daily pips for the past 20 days, which represents the average daily range, and then we make a high and low line for example, high line has yesterday's high minus average daily pips, yesterday's low plus average daily pips, and then we do H line create. I have to give a name, and we use the values that we calculated up here. Every time we begin to write a new line representing yesterday's high and low, we have to remove the previously drawn lines done here. We have to remove previously drawn lines in order to avoid both confusion when it's being drawn in the chart, and we also want to avoid an error when drawing multiple of the same objects on the chart in Forex. So yeah, that's essentially what you see in the red lines. The yellow lines are a little more complicated, but in a summary, these are Fibonacci lines. Fibonacci lines are meant to be a kind of retracement of a currency's movement in price, or I guess in an even more simpler term, it's a trail that shows the price movement of a currency or asset. So this retracement is done utilizing horizontal lines that serve as a kind of measuring tool. These lines are determined by the values called Fibonacci Ratios, and they pretty much are a retracement of the size difference of the highest high and the lowest low for a period of time. So up here, so if we're going to take the highest high and the lowest low and put that as a kind of like a line, you can say, this would be 100% ratio at the top here, and this would be absolute 0 at the bottom here. So just try to picture that in your head. But every value here, first off, these are standards. You want to retrace 78.6%, 61.8%, 50%. Well, not necessarily 30%, but I wanted to put that in anyway. 38.2%, 23%, all that. These are standard values for Fibonacci retracements. These are what are drawn. These are our resistance and support lines, the red lines and the yellow lines. These are our resistance and support lines, which determine if a price stops going higher or if a price stops going lower. I also want to add for the Fibonacci retracement lines, these are the next things that are drawn in our on-tick function, which is constantly running every time a tick happens in Forex. So yeah, we create Fibo. Let me go to that function just to show you. It's more of the same with create H lines. Create H lines. It essentially uses something called object create. So yeah, object create. There we go. But anyways, in create Fibo, we have to get the first bar in the main chart window, calculate the lowest low of the previous bar shifted, the highest value, and we determine if we're in an uptrend or a downtrend. This will enable us to kind of do this little connection here. It helps in determining. I'll get further into that. So we add labels to our object. These are just preset values that will get added once we start, once we finish drawing the line. And then we use anchor points relative to the trend we're on. So if we're on a downtrend, we create our Fibonacci line. Highest high, highest, shift highest, and then time shift lowest, lowest shift lowest. This just creates the type of object, which is the Fibonacci line. We set the width and style of our Fibonacci lines, and it would be essentially, determined by the user. And if the user wants to, we can create an unretraced zone that is basically this green area here. It's actually a bad part here. Let me try to continue it here. So this is done every day. The unretraced zone highlights essentially, let me zoom in here. The unretraced zone essentially highlights where where there is no Fibonacci retracement done. When these are calculated from here to here, there's no retracement here, no retracement zone. All this. There's Fibonacci retracement, there's not Fibonacci retracement. That's what this is supposed to be. But yeah, the user can turn that off if they don't like it. So we can do that if we want to. Yeah, that's one part. And also too, if we're not in a downtrend, we'll set the anchor point for the uptrend and it will come up. And if the user wants to have an unretraced zone, it can be drawn. And here as well, this is pretty much like a final cleanup. This puts all the labels and descriptions for every Fibonacci line. That is, or every Fibonacci ratio for the Fibonacci line. So that's essentially all that is done here. And this happens every tick, once again. And that is the second part of what we do in our Expert Advisor. So these are our resistance and support lines, and this is how they're drawn. If you want to take a look at it, you can do that yourself in our code. Now that we've finished drawing these resistance and support lines as written in the Gordon document, we can now move forward and add the indicators whose purpose is to maximize confidence as a trade, as I've said before. These indicators in strategy 1 are RSI, MACD, and Bollinger Bands. And that is implemented here in this function. Strategy, RSI, bands, MACD. The logic here is straightforward. Let me get there. So, yeah. It's straightforward. We calculate the upper and lower Bollinger Bands for the current and previous day. And this will help determine volatility. We calculate MACD moving average convergence using parameters that are determined by the user or by default, and then we get the RSI. And if this if-else code block basically means that if each of our indicators deem it so, based on the logic that was mentioned in the Gordon trading strategy, we can see whether or not a buy or sell order signal should be sent out. And then, yeah, so it's mentioned here as a string value, and then the order is sent out here. So now that this is summarized, let's take a look to our EA. Some time has passed, and we can see if there's been progress made during testing, and there has been activity, and we can see that we made profit. So I'm going to go back to this specific point right here, buy and take profit, to see what exactly just happened. So this happened on June 4th. At 1 o'clock and then at 3:30. Okay. So you can see here that we were in contraction and we were about to expand, or we're about to expand even more. So that's checked. And we want to make sure that the RSI is greater than 66.66. Right here. So let's see. Is it greater than 66.66? It is in fact greater than that. And now we want to make sure that the MACD the MACD value is in agreement with what is shown. And we can take a look. Was MACD greater than 0? It is. So once that's done, it's shown here. We make our buy order. Okay? And come over here. This is where we made our sell and our take profit, shown right here. This is 330. So the Bollinger Bands, still, there's some more expansion here, but it's about to contract. So we have that checked. RSI is greater than 50. And the MACD value, it should be equal to 0, according to what is calculated here. Fast you may, slow you may, all of this. So if it equals to 0, then we send the sell. Judging from what is shown mostly here, this does seem to be the case, logically. And it's all checked out, and it sells. So that was a good spot determined by our EA to make a sell. And it was correct. It made profit. Alrighty. Now that we took a look at the code and what it did, I'm going to touch upon the more streamlined, representation of what I was talking about. And that would be the UML diagrams made for this EA. So, right here. So the class diagram, I will just briefly hover over because that just tells you what functions or variables and what functions are in the EA. But here is the sequence diagram. It's straightforward. At runtime, our expert advisor initializes and calls upon these functions to start custom indicators. Then all the work is done on tick. So every tick, as I've said before, we create our lines of resistance and support, create H lines, and create Fibo. That's shown here. And then we jump straight into our strategy 1, and that is, in more detail over here. And once that's completed, we will send an order if the conditions are met. And that's right here. So, yeah, in our state chart diagram, we highlighted the important part of our EA, and that is when it determines buys and sells. So here we start. There are no orders made. We're idle. And then, if the conditions I've said before were met, either this or the other, then we will open a buy order. And we'll close and come over here. On the other hand, if these conditions are met, either this one or this one, then we will send a sell order. And this is essentially a more digestible version right here. Typo over here. I noticed this is supposed to be a sell. It's not buy. We don't buy on both. That would make it lose a lot of money. But yeah, if these conditions are met and there's no orders total for both sides, then you open buy over here, and then you open sell over here, and you come right back. So this is essentially a more digestible version of my overview for the group EA. You can use this as a quick reference anytime. You simply need to check out our Confluence page. Now that we've completed a look through the working code, let's take a look at our shortcomings with the development of this expert advisor. Just to bring it back to the first mention of this EA, there are two parts of the strategy. We only worked on the first part up here. Strategy 2 focuses on RSI and a 50-day simple moving average. When we were given this file for the Gordon strategy, we were able to watch videos showing how the creator, Gordon, made this strategy come to fruition. But we were unable to understand one video that had no audio, which we think depicted strategy 2. So we took to simply reading the document and doing our best to implement it. The function can be seen over here. So let me get there. Yeah, strategy 2. It can be, it can be seen here. But the logic is the same as the first strategy, but we use different indicator this time, and we don't have Bollinger Bands, so it's SMA and RSI. But as I recall now, when we tested this part by itself, the EA failed to make any orders at all, giving us simply no results. It was an empty report, and no actions were made. This is something that we wanted to look into, but we were unable to because we wanted to devote more time with what we could understand, and that was strategy 1. Another issue in our expert advisor currently is the low success when implementing a day trading functionality. So you can see up here at the top, right here in Untick. So as you can see, the code that we have currently with strategy 2, So yeah, you can see the code for strategy 2 is commented out, as well as this function right here, close orders. So what this function does is it simply checks the current time. One second. It simply checks the current time, and if it's the end of the day, we simply close orders. Essentially this should work, but we found that it did not, like our EA, once this was uncommented, it did not make as high a profit compared to how we had our EA before. What we did realize very recently though, is that this code, or this function call, is entirely encapsulated in onTick. Now, what is onTick? So onTick is essentially a function that is called whenever a tick event happens in Forex. And this applies to expert advisors mostly. Tick events are essentially whenever time passes and candles are recorded and etc. And that's essentially what happens with the tick event in my quick summary there. But there are times where on tick simply just does not get called. So this code, close orders, can be completely ignored. What we were thinking we could add, and what we would have liked to experiment with, is a kind of timer function that would constantly check what time it is to close our orders that is separate from on tick. That would have been something cool to look into. And another thing we wanted to add, so that's it for close orders. Simply make it separate from on tick and have it check the time independently without having the need to wait for a tick event to happen. So yeah, that's that. But another thing that we wanted to add to our EA, other than what was previously mentioned, is simply more functionality, or not necessarily functionality, but more optimization. There are parts in our code, for example, whenever our EA makes orders, it's hard-coded. So when you make an order, it's only one lot. We have an external parameter here for lots, but it simply just doesn't get used. We made the accident of we made the accident, my apologies, we made the accident of just hard coding it in certain parts. That was our fault. We simply wanted to make our code work. So we made the mistake of leaving customization in favor of profit, but this should be changed to enable customization as well. These past issues are the result of mistakes and bumps during our development of this EA. We hope the work that you do for this EA will improve it even further, should you choose to take up the challenge of doing it and continuing our work. So that about does it for the overview of our expert advisor. What I've done is essentially given you guys a summary of the EA. I ran it with you guys with using specific parameters, showed you guys where it tests well, told you guys about the table template that you should use. I also showed you how certain scenarios are executed, where there's a buy, where there's a sell, where that occurs in code, and I went over issues that essentially affected runtime, or that affected the execution of our code, things that we have commented out. I also suggested things that you could approach when you take on the challenge of working on this EA, and I summarized the work of our EA in quick diagrams to kind of get you more up to speed with what we've been working on. But I also made the mistake during this video. I've been splicing and editing this video, but I also forgot to reload the page for our Confluence. This is the version that you guys should be looking at. Surprise! We actually have more information that is of use to you in our Confluence. This should help you guys even more than what was previously on video. But, you know, everything's still pretty much here. Same information. You have references, you have code snippets, you have tests. All is at your disposal. So, yeah, we hope this video serves you well. We hope this Confluence serves you well. And best of luck trading and working on Forex and MQL4 and our expert advisor. Thank you so much.